I never imagined that one secret could burn down the life I thought I knew. But it did, and by the time the smoke cleared, I was no longer the person who sat at the kitchen table sipping tea and pretending everything was fine. Before I tell you what happened, I want to ask you something. If someone you loved betrayed you in the worst possible way, would you walk away? Or would you come back for blood? And while you think about that, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one, and I want to know who's listening from which corner of the world. My name is Nora. I'm 26 years old, and for most of my life I believed loyalty was a virtue you wore like armor. I believed family came first, even when it hurt. I believed in second chances. I believed in him, Sam, my husband, until the night everything cracked. We met in law school, two idealists convinced we could change the world and also pay off student loans. Sam was brilliant in a way that made people lean in, the kind of intelligence that looked effortless. He proposed to me in a winter snowfall, ring hidden in the pocket of his coat, and I said yes because I believed in forever. My sister, Claire, was my fiercest defender. Whether it was a late-night study session or a bad breakup, she was always there. We were small-town kids with big dreams. The first sign of trouble was subtle, like a hairline fracture in glass. Sam started coming home late, claiming meetings. He began closing his laptop with a little too much speed when I walked into the room. Claire began dismissing our plans with the excuse of work stuff, and she would laugh too loudly when we mentioned future in-laws. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself people had moments. Then one Thursday, the truth arrived in a way nothing could prepare me for. I had been working late on a brief, and decided to surprise Sam with dinner. I got to his office earlier than expected. He'd said he'd be free by 7. The lobby was dim, the city humming outside. I walked up the corridor, my heels soft against the carpet, and when I stepped into his glass-walled office, I found 2 cups on the conference table and a bouquet of lilies wilted where they'd been left too long. On the couch, Claire sat with her head thrown back, laughing, and Sam was leaning toward her, face close. Their laughter stopped when they saw me. Claire's smile faltered, then hardened. Sam's face went white. For a moment the three of us just stood like actors caught mid-scene. There was a silence so loud my ears rang. Neither of them tried to explain. Neither of them moved to me. I didn't shout. I didn't crumble. I left the room with my dinner untouched and sat in my car until dawn. The betrayal ate through me like acid. The next weeks were a study in cold calculation. I didn't want to be the woman who crumbled and begged. I wanted to be the woman who made sure they never forgot the shape of her fury. Revenge isn't a single act. It's a patience game. It is built on timing, on understanding the weaknesses you've been given and the doors they left unlocked. I started small. I stopped answering Sam's calls, I declined Claire's coffee invites, I let silence be my public reply. The silence disturbed them. They began to talk about me behind closed doors, their voices low and quick. I could hear the fear, like the small, uncertain footsteps of what might be exposed. Sam's weakness was obvious. His reputation. He had worked hard to appear incorruptible. Lectures, pro bono cases, awards lined on his office shelf. The man who had opened jars for me and told me jokes at 3 a.m. always loved being admired. Claire's weakness was vanity and opportunity. She wanted to climb, and she would use anything that looked like a ladder. She had started her own marketing consultancy and lived off endorsements, carefully curated Insta shots, and a smile that convinced people she was exactly as she presented. My first move was to gather evidence. Revenge without a plan is just noise. I combed through old emails Sam had left open on a day when he'd been careless. I found contracts with small clauses that shifted money into shadow accounts. I found invoices that didn't make sense. I had access to the family calendar, to the birthdays and anniversaries that gave me leverage. I wasn't a hacker. I was a careful reader of everything they left in my path. With Claire, I watched her public persona crack. I created burner accounts and began to trace suppliers, comments, and quiet threads where the truth could leak. How a boutique had sold knockoffs as originals, how an influencer's limited run was manufactured in bulk. People assume internet mobs move fast, but you need to feed them the right dish. I fed the outlets just enough to start the questions, the skepticism. And then I waited. Patience, again, is the instrument. People collapse under suspicion. They begin to point fingers and to shout louder than is wise. Sam's firm got an anonymous tip about some irregular billing practices. Claire's biggest client quietly demanded an audit. I watched their world contract like a lung losing air. One night, when the pressure had built but before the public storm, Claire showed up at my building. Her mascara had run and she smelled like cheap perfume. She wanted in. She wanted me to help her with a presentation, to pretend the crisis didn't exist. She reached for my hand like we were teenagers again. "Please, Nora, help me. I will fix this," she begged. I could have wept for her, for the broken girl she'd once been, for the love we'd shared. Instead, I kept my face calm as a mirror. "You chose your path," I said. "You chose what mattered to you." That moment, the way her cheeks crumpled, felt almost tender, and it made my resolve steel. I had thought revenge would feel like a final explosion, but it was a long, patient recentering of my life. The first public domino fell at Sam's annual firm dinner. I had contacted a local investigative reporter weeks earlier, feeding him documents that showed client funds were being funneled into shell accounts and then laundered through property purchases under different names. I watched him cross the room, lean in, and hand a folder to an editor in a casual way. That night, the headline was brutal: "Local firm under scrutiny for financial irregularities." Sam's name was in the subheading. He called me that night, voice raw. "Nora, I can explain." "Explain," I said, and let it hang. I didn't want explanations. I wanted accountability. While Sam's firm struggled to spin the story, Claire's social media imploded. Influencers she'd once called friends tweeted screenshots from suppliers exposing her inflated claims, and brands that had once flown her out for shoots issued statements cutting ties. Her boutique shuttered, then reopened under a different name, a ghost shop haunted by vendor lawsuits and empty racks. But here's what revenge taught me. It isn't purely about watching the guilty fall. It's about confronting what comes after. The collapse had immediate casualties. Junior associates at Sam's firm lost hours and income. Staff at Claire's boutique were left unpaid. I hadn't wanted innocent people to suffer, but the truth is that when you hit the core of a corrupt life, ripples reach parts of a community you never imagined. I slept badly those first weeks, the guilt a heavy curtain across my chest. Then a twist that I hadn't anticipated arrived like winter. A man I didn't know came to my door carrying a small envelope and the kind of look that meant he had important things to say. He introduced himself as a paralegal for Sam's elder partner, a man who had once mentored Sam. "Miss Carter," he said, using my maiden name with a softness I didn't expect, "your husband was not what he seemed. There are other names connected to the accounts. People you don't know." He told me about offshore companies, about pensions quietly shifted, about a charitable foundation that had been a public face to mask private siphoning. I listened and realized two things. 1. My actions had pulled at threads wider than I intended. 2. The same network that made Sam look untouchable included people who'd watched the fall of a life for sport. That knowledge turned my plan into something else. I could have exposed everything and walked away. I could have let the scandals be their punishment and disappeared into another city. But I had become invested, not just in retribution but in ensuring the ruin didn't breed more ruin. I began to talk to the people hurt by Sam and Claire's fallout. I spoke to junior lawyers who'd had their bonuses wiped, to retail workers who had waited weeks for pay. Paid back what I could. I used my savings to bridge payroll for those who were suddenly without income. It was not because I wanted absolution. I wanted to be the kind of person who could still stand in the mirror. The final act of the story came unexpectedly. Claire, defeated, attempted to flee with a duffel bag and a cash card she thought no one knew about. Sam, cornered and desperate, tried to make a deal with me. Protection in exchange for testimony against his larger network. He thought bargaining could buy him freedom. What he didn't get was that I no longer wanted him or his collusion. I wanted something cleaner. The truth aired and those responsible held to account. I turned him in. I gave the authorities everything I had. I didn't savor the arrest. I sat in a small room while officers moved through Sam's old office and took boxes away. The sound of locks being opened was oddly cleansing, an underscore to a life finally being unmasked. When it was over, people asked if I felt victorious. I did, but not in the way I expected. Victory felt like quiet mornings when the ache in my chest had eased enough to let me breathe. It felt like returning to work and receiving messages from junior associates thanking me for bridging their pay. It felt like finding the sister I thought I'd lost sitting on my porch with a cup of tea and an apology that ran deeper than sentences could reach. Claire never fully apologized for the betrayal. Some wounds are too proud to admit fault, but she tried. We met, awkward and honest, and she told me about the hunger that had driven her. The pressure to be seen, to matter. I had once been driven by loyalty. She had been driven by attention. Both motives had led to harm. We reconciled not in a single dramatic embrace, but in small things. A shared filing session for the staff restitution program, a joint call to a former employee to offer support. Years later, the consequences had rippled into something I could live with. Sam served time and paid fines. The network that had made him untouchable was under scrutiny. Claire rebuilt, slower and humbler, running a small community project that helped women start honest businesses. I started a non-profit to help workers displaced by corporate scandals. Small grants, microloans, emotional counseling. I used what the fire had revealed to build something that kept people whole. If there is a moral here, it is complicated. Revenge fed my sense of justice, yes, but only when I paired it with responsibility did it stop devouring the good parts of my life. I became someone unrecognizable at first, harder, angrier, and then someone I could live with again. Deliberate, careful, resolved to repair what I had broken. So I'll ask you again, if you found out those closest to you had betrayed you for their greed, what would you do? Burn it all down and walk away? Or take the slow path of retribution and repair? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I mean it. I read them all. And if this story made your pulse quicken, hit like and subscribe. There are more stories to come. All of them are messy, human, and impossible to forget.